Welcome to the Life Paradox, where reality is stranger than fiction. Emma Crawford clutched the folded paper in her trembling hands, the doctor's words still echoing in her mind. 6 months. Maybe less. Her 8-year-old son Lucas had stopped responding to treatment, and now they were talking about making him comfortable, about wishes, about goodbyes. He wants to do what? Jack, her husband asked, his voice barely above a whisper in their kitchen as their children slept upstairs. A tea party, Emma repeated, smoothing out the crumpled paper where Lucas had drawn his final wish in wobbly crayon letters. With all his stuffed animals, in Meadow Park. Jack ran his hands through his hair, turning away to hide the tears that threatened to spill. Out of everything in the world, that's what he wants? The child life specialist said it's not unusual. Children often find comfort in simple joys. Emma's voice cracked on the last word. Every paradox begins with a question. If you love unraveling life's biggest mysteries, hit subscribe and join the Life Paradox, where every story bends reality. The next morning, Lucas sat at the breakfast table, his thin frame swimming in pajamas that once fit perfectly. Despite the hollows beneath his eyes, there was an unmistakable sparkle there, one that appeared whenever he talked about his wish. Mr. Whiskers will sit next to me, Lucas explained, referring to his well-worn teddy bear. And Hoppy needs a special cushion because his stuffing is lumpy on one side. 12-year-old Mia watched her little brother from across the table, pushing her cereal around the bowl. "You're going to invite your stuffed animals to a tea party?" she asked, her voice caught between confusion and the careful gentleness she'd adopted since his diagnosis. "Not just them," Lucas said with conviction. "Dr. Wilson and Nurse Beth and Ms. Angie from the playroom." He looked up at his mother. "And everyone who matters." Emma exchanged a glance with Jack over Lucas's head. The unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. Their son was making plans to say goodbye. That afternoon, Emma called Dr. Wilson's office, expecting to leave a message about Lucas's unusual request. To her surprise, the doctor's assistant put her through immediately. "A tea party?" Dr. Wilson repeated, his normally clinical tone softening. "When does he want to have it?" "Saturday after next," Emma said. "But really, doctor, I know you're busy. Lucas will understand if—" "I'll be there," he interrupted. 2 o'clock, did you say? I'm marking my calendar right now." One by one, Emma made the calls. To Nurse Beth, who had held Lucas through countless procedures. To Ms. Angie, who always saved the best toys for him. To Chaplain Tom, who answered Lucas's increasingly philosophical questions. Without exception, each person rearranged their schedules to attend a tea party for stuffed animals. That night, as Emma tucked Lucas into bed, surrounded by the plush companions that would soon join him at his special event, she brushed the wisps of hair from his forehead. "Sweetheart, why a tea party? You could have asked for anything. Disney World, meeting your favorite baseball player." Lucas looked up at her with eyes that sometimes seemed ancient in their understanding. "Because," he whispered as sleep began to claim him, "at a tea party, everyone sits together for a while, nobody's rushing, nobody's scared, and everybody gets to say what they need to say." Emma sat frozen beside his bed long after he fell asleep, understanding washing over her in waves. Her son wasn't planning just any party. He was creating a moment where time would stand still, where goodbyes could be spoken without the word ever being said. The Crawford family kitchen transformed into command central over the next week. Emma meticulously listed supplies on color-coded sticky notes, while Jack researched rental companies for small tables and chairs. Mia, initially reluctant, now sat, cross-legged on the floor sorting through her brother's collection of stuffed animals, carefully brushing their matted fur. "Lucas wants Mr. Whiskers to wear a bow tie," she announced, holding up the ancient teddy bear whose left ear hung by a few threads. "But I can't find one small enough." Jack looked up from his laptop. "I'll stop by the craft store tomorrow. There must be ribbon we can use. These ordinary conversations about extraordinary circumstances had become their new normal, discussing funeral arrangements disguised as party planning. Every decision felt monumental, laden with the weight of knowing these memories would need to sustain them for a lifetime. Lucas shuffled into the kitchen, his Batman slippers scuffing against the tile floor. Despite the feeding tube taped to his cheek and the port beneath his pajama shirt, he moved with purpose toward the refrigerator where his drawings hung. "I made place cards," he announced, producing a stack of folded construction paper from behind his back. "Hoppy sits here next to Nurse Beth, and Mr. Whiskers needs to be between me and Mom." Emma knelt beside him, examining his careful crayon lettering. "These are perfect, sweetheart. Who's this one for?" Lucas took the card, his thin fingers tracing the wobbly letters. "That's for Dad's empty chair." The silence that followed felt tangible. Jack and Emma hadn't been in the same room for more than necessary consultation since their argument 3 weeks ago, when Jack had wanted to try an experimental treatment in another state, and Emma had insisted on keeping Lucas comfortable, instead of putting him through more suffering. "I won't have an empty chair," Jack said finally, his voice tight. "I promise." That night, after the children were asleep, Emma found Jack sitting on the back porch steps, staring into the darkness. Without speaking, she lowered herself beside him, the space between them charged with unspoken grief. "What if we're wrong?" Jack whispered, not looking at her. "What if we should be fighting harder?" Emma's eyes burned with tears she thought had been exhausted hours ago. "The doctors said—" "I know what they said." Jack's shoulders hunched forward. "But he's 8 years old, Emma. 8. He should be playing baseball and collecting bugs and—" His voice broke. "He shouldn't be planning his own goodbye party." Emma reached across the divide between them, her fingers finding his in the darkness. "I don't think that's what he's doing," she said softly. "I think he's trying to show us how to remember him." The following day brought an unexpected visitor. Nurse Beth arrived unannounced during Lucas's afternoon nap, carrying a large wicker basket. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by," she said as Emma invited her in. "But I thought these might help with the tea party." Inside the basket lay dozens of mismatched vintage teacups, each one unique in its pattern and shape. "They belonged to my grandmother," Beth explained, her eyes lingering on a delicate porcelain cup with hand-painted violets. "I've been collecting them for years, never knowing quite why." "Now I think maybe this was the reason." Emma traced the gold rim of a cup. "They're beautiful, but are you sure? What if they break?" Beth's smile was gentle, but firm. "Things are meant to be used, Emma. Their purpose isn't fulfilled sitting in storage." She squeezed Emma's hand. "And some things become more precious when they've been part of something important." Upstairs, Lucas woke from his nap with a new idea. He wanted to write invitations, real ones, on paper, to be delivered by hand or mail. For 3 hours, he dictated his carefully chosen words while Mia transcribed them onto cards decorated with stickers and drawings. At dinner, Lucas pushed his untouched food around the plate, his energy depleted from the afternoon's activities. But his eyes remained bright as he described his vision for the perfect tea party setting. "And everyone needs to bring their favorite stuffed animal," he insisted. "Even Dr. Wilson." Jack smiled for what felt like the first time in weeks. "I'm not sure Dr. Wilson has a stuffed animal, buddy." "Everyone has one somewhere," Lucas replied with the unshakable certainty of childhood. "He just needs to remember where he put it." The morning dawned crisp and clear, sunlight filtering through the maple tree outside Lucas's window, casting dappled shadows on his bed. Emma found him already awake, unusually quiet as she helped him take his morning medications. "Just one more day," she said, attempting brightness. "Are you excited about your tea party?" Lucas nodded solemnly. "Mom, can I tell you a secret?" Emma sat on the edge of his bed, her heart constricting at how the mattress barely dipped under her weight now. Of course, sweetheart. Anything. My tea party isn't just for tomorrow, he said, his voice small but determined. It's for after I'm gone, too. The room seemed to tilt. Emma steadied herself against the nightstand, knocking over a bottle of hand sanitizer. What do you mean? Lucas's eyes, so like her own, met hers without flinching. I want you and Dad and Mia to have the tea party every year on my birthday, with my stuffed animals, and I want you to invite other kids who are sick. Emma struggled to breathe around the sudden tightness in her chest. They had been so careful not to talk about dying explicitly, using gentler phrases like, when you feel too tired or if things get harder. But here was her 8-year-old son, clear-eyed and certain, making plans for a world that would continue without him. That's what you really wish for? She managed, her voice barely audible. Lucas nodded. Promise me, Mom, please promise. Before she could answer, Jack appeared in the doorway, car keys in hand, ready to drive Lucas to his final pre-party checkup. The conversation hung suspended between mother and son as they prepared to leave. At the hospital, Dr. Wilson examined Lucas with his usual thoroughness, but there was a new gentleness in his manner. As he pressed the stethoscope against Lucas's thin chest, he asked, So, young man, I hear I need to bring a stuffed animal tomorrow? Lucas nodded emphatically. Your favorite one. The one that makes you feel better when you're scared. Something flickered across the doctor's professional facade. And what if I don't have one anymore? Then borrow one, Lucas said simply. But you have to tell its story when you introduce it at the party. Everyone does. Later that afternoon, as Lucas rested, Emma and Jack sat in the kitchen reviewing final preparations. The rental company would deliver tables and chairs at 9. The bakery would bring miniature cupcakes and cookies at 11. The weather forecast promised sunshine and mild temperatures, perfect for an outdoor gathering. He wants us to continue. It, Emma said suddenly, breaking the artificial normality of their conversation. The tea party, every year on his birthday with other sick children. Jack set down his coffee mug with deliberate care. He told you this? This morning. Emma couldn't meet his eyes. He made me promise. The silence stretched between them, filled with the enormity of what their son was asking. Not just a beautiful memory to close his life, but a commitment to transform their grief into something meaningful, something ongoing, something that would require them to face his absence together, year after year. Did you promise him? Jack finally asked. I didn't answer. You came in. Jack reached across the table, taking her hand in his, the first voluntary touch in weeks. Then we'll promise him together. Tomorrow. That evening, Lucas asked to speak with Mia alone. The siblings sat on Lucas's bed, surrounded by the stuffed animals waiting for their debut at tomorrow's celebration. You have to help Mom and Dad keep their promise, Lucas told his sister, his voice serious. About the tea party every year. Mia picked at a loose thread on the quilt, fighting back tears. I don't want to think about that. But you have to, Lucas insisted. Because Mom might forget some parts, and Dad might not want to do it because he'll be sad. But you'll remember everything exactly right. Why does it matter so much? Mia asked, unable to keep the frustration from her voice. It's just a stupid tea party. Lucas wasn't offended. Instead, he reached for her hand, his fingers bird-fragile in hers. Because happy and sad can be in the same place at the same time, and I want you to have somewhere to put all the sad, so it doesn't stay stuck inside you. That night, after tucking Lucas in, Emma found Jack in the garage, meticulously painting a wooden sign that read, Lucas's Tea Party, in bright blue letters, Lucas's favorite color. It's beautiful, she said, watching him add careful details around the edges. I thought we could hang it in the park tomorrow, Jack replied without looking up. And maybe in the front yard, for the ones that come after. After, Emma, Repeated, the word both terrible and necessary. She sat down beside him, picking up a brush. Together they added stars and planets to the sign's border, silent acknowledgement of the promise they would make to their son tomorrow. The morning of the tea party arrived with golden sunshine and a sky so perfectly blue it seemed painted for the occasion. Emma woke before dawn, moving quietly through the house, checking and rechecking lists. By 7, Jack was loading the car with decorations. By 8, Mia had arranged Lucas's stuffed animals in a row on the living room sofa, each wearing its designated accessories, bow ties, tiny hats, or miniature scarves. Lucas himself slept, later than usual, his body conserving energy for the day ahead. When he finally appeared in the kitchen, he wore the button-down shirt and sweater vest they'd bought specially for the occasion. "How do I look?" he asked, attempting a twirl that nearly unbalanced him. "Like the perfect host," Emma answered, swallowing past the lump in her throat. They arrived at Meadow Park at 10:30. Jack had chosen a spot beneath a sprawling oak tree, its leaves just beginning to turn crimson and gold. The rental company had already set up 3 circular tables with child-sized chairs, exactly as Lucas had specified. "The tables need to be closer together," Lucas directed from his wheelchair, "so everyone can talk to each other." As they arranged decorations, paper lanterns hanging from lower branches, fairy lights strung through the bushes, and Nurse Beth's teacups at each place setting, Emma noticed a car pulling into the parking area. Then another, and another, Dr. Wilson was the first to approach, carrying what appeared to be an ancient, well-worn plush dog. Behind him came Nurse Beth with a teddy bear poking out of her bag. Then Chaplain Tom, Ms. Angie from the playroom, and Lucas's first-grade teacher, Mrs. Garcia, each carrying their own stuffed companions. "We're early," Dr. Wilson explained, "but we thought you might need help setting up." By noon, the small grove had transformed into something magical. Colorful bunting swayed between trees. Wildflowers filled mason jars on each table. A separate station held teapots of different juices and hot chocolate, while another displayed cookies and cupcakes on tiered stands. At 10 minutes to 2, Emma helped Lucas from his wheelchair into the special host chair they'd decorated with streamers and balloons. Mr. Whiskers sat proudly beside him, bow tie slightly askew. "People are coming," Mia announced, pointing toward the parking lot. Emma glanced over, expecting to see the physical therapist or perhaps some of Lucas's former classmates who had been invited. Instead, she saw dozens of people streaming toward the park, many she recognized from their neighborhood or church, but many more who were complete strangers. "Did you invite all these people?" she asked Jack in confusion. He shook his head, looking equally baffled. "Just the names on Lucas's list." Nurse Beth approached, her expression soft with understanding. "It was on social media. Someone shared Lucas's story and his wish for a tea party. I think people wanted to be part of it." Emma felt momentary panic. This wasn't the intimate gathering Lucas had planned. But when she turned to check on her son, she found him beaming with delight as more and more people arrived, each carrying a stuffed animal. By 2 o'clock, over 100 people had gathered in the grove. Extra chairs appeared from nearby picnic areas. Strangers introduced themselves to the family, explaining how they'd heard about the tea party, from friends of friends, community bulletin boards, local parent groups. A woman Emma had never met approached her, eyes brimming with tears. "My daughter had leukemia 5 years ago. She's in remission now, but when I heard about your son's tea party..." She gestured to a teenage girl standing nearby. "She insisted on bringing the stuffed penguin that got her through treatment." Before Emma could respond, Lucas's voice rang out, surprisingly strong. "Welcome to my tea party," he announced. Mr. Whiskers clutched to his chest. "I'm really glad you all came, even if I don't know you." A small ripple of gentle laughter moved through the crowd. "The rules are simple. We drink tea, or hot chocolate, if you want, and eat cookies. and everyone has to introduce their stuffed animal and tell why it's special. As Lucas spoke, Emma noticed Jack wiping tears from his cheeks. She reached for his hand, finding it already reaching for hers. The tea party unfolded like a flower opening in slow motion. Lucas, seated in his place of honor, presided over the gathering with surprising stamina, his face animated as each guest introduced their stuffed companion. The stories poured forth, of childhood treasures kept through decades, of hospital gifts that provided comfort during dark nights, of toys purchased that very morning but already imbued with meaning. Dr. Wilson hesitantly presented his weathered plush dog, explaining in his usually professional voice that now wavered with emotion. "This is Scout. He was given to me when I was 7, the night before my appendectomy. He's why I became a doctor." The crowd grew silent as Lucas raised his hand. "Can I say something about my animals now?" Emma moved closer, worried about his energy levels, but Lucas straightened in his chair with newfound strength. One by one, he lifted each of his beloved stuffed companions, sharing not just their names and origins, but also what they had taught him. "This is Hoppy," he said, holding up a floppy-eared rabbit missing most of its fur. "He taught me that you can lose your hair and still be beautiful." A murmur of appreciation rippled through the gathering. Lucas continued, his voice growing more confident with each introduction. "This is Gloria," he said of a sparkly unicorn. "She reminds me that magic is just stuff we don't understand yet." When he reached for the last animal, a wise-looking owl, with button eyes, Lucas paused. "This is Professor Hoot. He's the smartest one. He told me that the people we love are never really gone as long as we remember their stories." Emma felt Jack's arm slip around her waist, steadying her as the world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Their 8-year-old son wasn't just saying goodbye. He was teaching them how to live without him. What happened next took everyone by surprise. Lucas carefully stood, waving away his father's supportive hand. "I have presents for some people," he announced. The crowd fell silent as he picked up Mr. Whiskers, his most treasured companion since infancy. Lucas made his way to where a young girl sat in a wheelchair, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf. Emma recognized her as Zoe, a child they'd met during treatment who had recently received difficult news about her prognosis. "Mr. Whiskers wants to live with you now," Lucas told her, placing the teddy bear in her lap. "He's really good at hospital stays." The girl's mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming freely down her face. One by one, Lucas distributed his cherished stuffed animals. Gloria the unicorn went to his sister Mia. "Because you need to remember to believe in magic," he told her as she clutched the sparkly creature to her chest. Professor Hoot was presented to Jack. "Dad needs the wisdom," Lucas explained with a small smile. Nurse Beth received the floppy-eared rabbit. Dr. Wilson was given a plush dragon that, Lucas said, breathes courage instead of fire. As the distribution continued, Emma felt her heart splitting open. These weren't impulsive decisions. Her son had planned this all along, ensuring his beloved companions would continue to provide comfort after he no longer could. When Lucas returned to his chair, only one stuffed animal remained. A small, plain brown bear without any distinguishing features except for a red heart stitched onto its chest. "This is Hope," Lucas said, his voice growing tired but still clear. "She's for my mom, for later." Emma accepted the simple bear, unable to speak as Lucas leaned against her, suddenly exhausted from his exertions. The tea party continued around them, conversations flowing like gentle currents, but mother and son remained in their quiet bubble of understanding. Dr. Wilson approached them after a while, his clinical eye assessing Lucas's condition. "He's doing remarkably well," he murmured to Emma. "This kind of clarity and energy, it's not what I would have expected given his latest results." Emma nodded, having noticed the same inexplicable rally. For months, Lucas had been declining steadily, each day bringing new losses of function or stamina. Yet today he shone with a luminosity that defied medical explanation. As the afternoon light began to soften toward evening, guests gradually departed. Each one stopped to thank Lucas, many kneeling to embrace him or whisper private messages in his ear. Emma watched as her son received these goodbyes with grace beyond his years, offering comfort to those who had come to comfort him. When only family and the closest medical team remained, they gathered around Lucas's chair in a loose circle. Jack brought out the wooden sign they had painted, now adorned with signatures and messages from every guest. "We have something to tell you, buddy," Jack said, his voice steady despite the emotion Emma could see in his eyes. "Mom and I promise to have this tea party every year on your birthday, with your stuffed animals, and we'll invite other kids who need some magic and wisdom." Lucas's face lit up with his brightest smile of the day. "You promise? For real?" "For real," Emma confirmed. The simple bear named Hope clutched in her hands. "Every year." Mia stepped forward, Gloria the unicorn tucked under her arm, "and I'll help them remember all the details exactly right." Lucas nodded, satisfaction evident in his tired eyes. "Then everything will be okay," he said simply. As the sun dipped below the tree line, casting long shadows across their small gathering, no one spoke the obvious truth, that this perfect day had been both a beginning and an ending. The tea party was over, but its purpose had just been fulfilled. 2 weeks after the tea party, autumn deepened around the Crawford home. Leaves cascaded from the maple tree outside Lucas's window, creating a rust-colored carpet on the lawn. Inside, the house had transformed into a different kind of hospital ward. A hospice bed occupied the living room now, positioned so Lucas could see the television and the bird feeder outside the window. Emma maintained her vigil in the armchair beside him, sleeping in short bursts between medication doses and comfort measures. The stuffed animals from the tea party, now returned to Lucas for his remaining time, surrounded him like silent guardians, each one holding the stories and love of those who had brought them. Jack entered from the kitchen, carrying a tray with ginger ale and ice chips. "How's our guy doing?" he asked, the forced brightness in his voice wearing thin around the edges. "He's been watching the Cardinals at the feeder," Emma replied, matching his tone. They had developed this careful language, speaking around the truth even as it pressed in from all sides. Lucas stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Dad," he whispered, "did you remember to water Mom's plants?" Jack set down the tray, puzzled by the question. Emma hadn't tended her houseplants in months, all energy redirected to Lucas's care. "I'll check on them," Jack promised, smoothing the blanket across his son's thin shoulders. Lucas nodded, satisfied. "The lady at the flower shop said they need water twice a week. The African violets are the trickiest." Emma and Jack exchanged confused glances. Lucas had never been to a flower shop, certainly not recently. Dr. Wilson had warned them about this, the fluctuation between perfect clarity and gentle confusion that often characterized final days. Sometimes Lucas spoke to people who weren't there or referenced conversations that had never happened. The medical term was terminal restlessness, but Emma preferred to think of it as her son already living partly in two worlds. That evening, as twilight gathered in the corners of the room, Lucas asked for his tea party journal, the leather-bound notebook Mia had given him to record his special day. He'd been making entries each night, sometimes drawing pictures, sometimes dictating. Thoughts for Emma to transcribe when his hands grew too shaky. "I need to write something important," he insisted, though he had barely eaten all day and had refused even liquid medications. Emma held the pen for him as he whispered his words. "The tea party isn't over when it's over. It keeps going inside the people who were there. That's why stories matter." He fell asleep mid-sentence, the pen trailing a blue line across the page. Emma didn't erase it. The next morning brought crisis. Lucas's breathing grew labored, his oxygen levels dropping, despite the supplemental flow through his nasal cannula. The hospice nurse increased his morphine, explaining in gentle terms that this was an expected development. "Should we call Dr. Wilson?" Jack asked, hovering anxiously. At the foot of the bed, the nurse shook her head. "Lucas is transitioning now. The hospital team will want to be notified, but there's nothing more they can do medically." Mia came home from school early, summoned by Emma's carefully worded text message. The family gathered around Lucas's bed, maintaining their orbit around his increasingly distant star. As evening approached, Lucas opened his eyes with unexpected lucidity. "Is everyone here?" he asked, his voice surprisingly strong. "We're all here, sweetheart," Emma assured him, her heart contracting at this momentary return of her son. "Good," Lucas said, "because I need you to promise about the tea party again. Out loud, so I can hear it." Jack knelt beside the bed. "We promise, buddy. Every year on your birthday, with all the stuffed animals." "And other kids who are sick," Lucas reminded him. "And other kids," Jack confirmed, his voice breaking. Lucas turned his gaze to Mia. "You'll help them remember everything, right?" She nodded, clutching Gloria the unicorn. Every detail. The tables close together. The special teacups. All of it. Finally, Lucas looked at his mother, his eyes reflecting a wisdom that had always seemed ancient to her. "And you'll bring hope? Every time?" Emma reached for the simple brown bear with the red stitched heart. "I'll bring hope," she promised. "Every single time." Lucas nodded once, satisfied. "Then I'm ready," he said simply. The hours that followed moved with dreamlike quality. Lucas drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes speaking clearly, sometimes murmuring words they couldn't quite catch. The hospice nurse came and went, adjusting medications, offering quiet support. Around midnight, as rain began to tap against the windows, Lucas opened his eyes once more. "Mom," he whispered. "The tea party worked." Emma leaned closer. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Everyone got what they needed," he said. "Even me." Those were his last coherent words. As the night deepened, his breathing grew more irregular, the pauses between breaths stretching longer. Emma, Jack, and Mia maintained their vigil, taking turns holding his increasingly cool hands, whispering reassurances about permission and love and remembering. Just before dawn, in that hushed moment when night is not quite finished but morning hasn't yet begun, Lucas Crawford took his final breath. It was so gentle, so undramatic, that for several moments no one was certain it had happened. The hospice nurse confirmed what their hearts already knew. Lucas had completed his journey, just as the first cardinal of the morning arrived at the feeder outside the window. The days following Lucas's death passed in a blur of necessary arrangements and unwanted decisions. Emma moved through them as if underwater, her body performing required functions while her mind remained tethered to that final moment. The imperceptible transition from her son being here to being gone. Jack immersed himself in details, channeling grief into action, selecting a small blue casket, organizing the service, acknowledging the flood of sympathy cards and casseroles that arrived at their door. Mia returned to school after 3 days, insisting that normal routines would help, though she carried Gloria the unicorn in her backpack. The funeral service was brief but beautiful, held in the same park grove where the tea party had taken place just weeks earlier. Many of the same people attended, some still carrying the stuffed animals Lucas had admired. Dr. Wilson spoke eloquently about Lucas's courage. Nurse Beth read a children's book about stars. The first-grade class sang, "What a Wonderful World." Emma heard it all as if from a great distance, clutching hope, the plain brown bear with the stitched red heart. She had slept with it every night since Lucas's passing, often waking to find her cheeks wet with tears she didn't remember crying. A week later, as the initial shock began to fade into the duller ache of ongoing absence, Emma was sorting through Lucas's belongings when she discovered something unexpected. Inside each of the stuffed animals he had given away at the tea party was a small note, written in his careful handwriting during those final preparations. In Mr. Whiskers, now living with young Zoe, he had tucked, "When you're scared, squeeze his paw. That's where the brave lives." In Professor Hoot, given to Jack, "Dad, owls know when to be quiet and listen. That's how they get so smart." In Gloria the Unicorn, now Mia's constant companion, "Magic is real. It just looks different than you expect." Emma called Jack and Mia into Lucas's room, spreading the animals and their messages across the bed. Together, they discovered that Lucas had hidden notes in every single one, personalized messages for each recipient that somehow addressed exactly what they might need in their grief. "How did he know?" Mia whispered, reading the note from Gloria again. "How did he know what we'd need to hear after he was gone?" Jack shook his head, clutching Professor Hoot. "He always saw more than we realized." With trembling hands, Emma reached for Hope, the bear Lucas had given her for later. She hadn't thought to check inside. Carefully, she located the small opening in the seam at the back and extracted a folded piece of paper. Written in Lucas's handwriting were 4 simple words: "I'm still with you." Emma sank to the floor, the note clutched to her chest as the grief she'd been holding at bay crashed through her carefully constructed walls. Jack knelt beside her, gathering her into his arms as they both wept, not just for the loss of their son, but for the extraordinary gift he had given them even in leaving. That night, the 3 remaining Crawfords sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by Lucas's stuffed animals and their messages. The raw wound of his absence remained, but something else had begun to take shape alongside it, a sense of purpose that emerged from the final wishes of an 8-year-old boy. "We need to start planning," Jack said, his voice hoarse but determined. "For the first anniversary tea party. Lucas's birthday is in 10 months. Emma nodded, running her fingers over Hope's stitched heart. "We'll need to contact the families from the hospital, set up a small committee maybe. And get permits for the park," Mia added. "Lucas would want everything done properly." As they began listing tasks and ideas, Emma felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere, as if the crushing weight of grief had been joined by something lighter, something that allowed them to breathe just a fraction more freely. "He knew," she said suddenly, interrupting Mia's discussion of invitation designs. "Lucas knew this would happen, that planning the next tea party would give us not happiness exactly, but purpose." Jack nodded slowly. "The stuffed animals? The notes, the annual tradition. It wasn't just about his goodbye. It was about our path forward." In the weeks that followed, word spread about Lucas's hidden messages. Recipients of his stuffed animals began sharing their notes on social media, each revelation adding another dimension to the story of a little boy whose wisdom had transcended his years, and now his lifetime. Zoe's mother posted a photo of Mr. Whiskers with his message about bravery, explaining how her daughter squeezed his paw before each difficult procedure. Dr. Wilson admitted during a pediatric oncology conference that he kept Professor Hoot on his desk, a reminder to listen more than he spoke with his young patients. The local newspaper ran a feature story titled "The Tea Party That Never Ends," chronicling Lucas's last wish and the ripple effects it continued to create throughout the community. Donations began arriving at the Crawford home, money designated specifically for future tea parties. Emma found herself answering emails from strangers in the evenings, sharing Lucas's story with people across the country and eventually around the world. A children's hospital in another state inquired about starting their own annual stuffed animal tea party. A grief support group for siblings asked Mia to speak about Gloria the Unicorn and finding magic in mourning. 3 months after Lucas's death, Emma finally returned to work part-time. Her colleagues had kept her classroom intact, the plants thriving thanks to Jack's faithful watering. She brought hope to school each day, setting the brown bear on her desk where her students quickly accepted its presence without question. "My son gave her to me," she explained simply when a new student asked. To remind me that hope stays even when everything else changes. On difficult days, when grief ambushed her in unexpected moments, Emma would reach for the note hidden inside. Hope, I'm still with you. The paper had grown soft from repeated handling, the creases deepening with each unfolding, but the message remained as clear as the day she'd discovered it. As Lucas's birthday approached, the anniversary tea party evolved from concept to reality. Jack secured the same grove in Meadow Park. Mia designed invitations that captured the essence of the original gathering. Emma coordinated with the Children's Hospital to identify families who might benefit from inclusion. The night before Lucas's birthday, the Crawfords gathered around the kitchen table, making final preparations. The wooden sign Jack had painted for the first tea party stood propped against the wall, ready to be displayed again. Nurse Beth's vintage teacups waited in padded boxes. The stuffed animals Lucas had distributed sat in a place of honor on the sideboard, each wearing its designated accessories, ready to attend in proxy for their new owners who would be present. Do you think he knows? Mia asked suddenly, looking up from the name cards she was lettering. Do you think Lucas knows we kept our promise? Emma and Jack exchanged glances, the question hanging between them, unanswerable, yet essential. Yes, Emma said finally, certainty warming her voice. He knows. The morning of the first anniversary tea party dawned with the same perfect blue sky that had blessed the original gathering. Emma woke early, her dreams filled with fragments of memory. Lucas's voice, his smile when receiving his first stuffed animal, the weight of his small body in her arms. She found Jack already in the kitchen, staring into his coffee cup, the silence between them comfortable now in a way it hadn't been since before Lucas's diagnosis. It's been exactly 1 year, he said without looking up. Emma nodded, reaching for Hope on the counter where she'd left the bear last night. 365 days of learning to live differently. Mia joined them, already dressed in the outfit she'd carefully selected. A blue dress the same shade as Lucas had loved, with Gloria the unicorn pinned to her shoulder like a corsage. Are we ready? She asked, the question encompassing far more than the day's logistics. By mid-morning, they arrived at Meadow Park to find volunteers already setting up tables beneath the oak tree, now fully green in late spring splendor. The hospital's child life specialists had coordinated transportation for 5 families with seriously ill children. Local businesses had donated refreshments. The community theater group had prepared a puppet show featuring stuffed animals coming to life. As Emma arranged Nurse Beth's teacups at each place setting, a familiar voice called her name. She turned to find Zoe approaching, walking with the assistance of a cane, Mr. Whiskers tucked securely under her arm. The doctor said I'm strong enough to come, the girl announced, her face thin but brightened by excitement. I brought Mr. Whiskers just like Lucas wanted. One by one, the guests arrived, many from the original tea party, others newcomers, drawn by Lucas's story. Each brought a stuffed animal, each understood the protocol without explanation. The circle of chairs expanded to accommodate everyone, just as Lucas had insisted they should, close enough for conversation across tables. At exactly 2 o'clock, Emma stood beside Jack and Mia at the head table, facing the assembled gathering. The 3 of them had discussed who should speak, finally deciding they would share the responsibility as they now shared everything else. Welcome to Lucas's tea party, Jack began, his voice steady and warm. For those who were here last year, thank you for keeping your promise to our son. For those joining us for the first time, thank you for becoming part of his story. Mia stepped forward next, Gloria the unicorn in her hands. My brother believed that stuffed animals hold our secrets and our magic. He believed that sharing them helps us feel less alone when things are hard. Finally, Emma spoke. Hope clutched against her heart. Lucas wanted this tea party to continue every year, not just to remember him, but to create a space where joy and sadness could exist together, where children facing serious illness could feel normal for an afternoon, where stuffed animals could remind us all how to be brave and wise and hopeful. As the tea party unfolded, with introductions of stuffed companions, sharing of stories, laughter mingling with tears, Emma found herself observing more than participating. She watched as a teenage boy with a feeding tube explained his dragon's powers to an enthralled 4-year-old girl awaiting a heart transplant. She noticed Dr. Wilson kneeling beside a nervous father, Professor Hoot perched on his shoulder as he offered quiet reassurance. Most of all, she watched the transformative power of what Lucas had created. This strange, beautiful gathering where vulnerability became strength, where illness didn't define identity, where stuffed animals served as bridges between strangers, who quickly became friends. Mid-afternoon, as conversations flowed around her, Emma felt a tug on her sleeve. A small boy stood beside her chair, perhaps 6 years old, his head bald from treatment, clutching a well-loved giraffe. "Are you Lucas's mom?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Emma nodded, kneeling to meet his eyes. "My name is Thomas. The nurses told me about your son." He held out his giraffe. "This is Spots. He helps me be brave during the hard parts." "It's wonderful to meet you both," Emma said, introducing Hope in return. Thomas studied the plain brown bear with serious eyes. "She doesn't look special," he observed with the honest assessment of childhood. "Sometimes the most special things don't look special on the outside," Emma explained, "but they carry important things inside." The boy considered this, then nodded with wisdom beyond his years. "Like people." "Exactly like people," Emma agreed, something expanding in her chest that felt remarkably like joy. Not replacing grief, but existing alongside it, just as Lucas had somehow known it could. As the golden afternoon light began to soften toward evening, families reluctantly gathered their belongings. Unlike the first tea party, this one held no undercurrent of final goodbyes. Instead, promises of "see you next year" echoed across the grove. Jack carefully packed Nurse Beth's teacups, now augmented by new donations that would allow the tradition to grow. Mia collected email addresses for her newly established Tea Party Committee. Hospital staff thanked the Crawfords for creating a day where medicine and procedures had been forgotten in favor of stuffed animal stories and tiny sandwiches. When only family remained, Emma, Jack, and Mia stood together beneath the oak tree where Lucas had presided over his special gathering 1 year earlier. "Do you think he would be pleased?" Jack asked, his arm around Emma's shoulders. Before she could answer, a cardinal landed on a branch directly above them, its brilliant red feathers catching the last rays of sunshine. The bird tilted its head, studying them with bright eyes before bursting into song. Emma smiled, looking from the cardinal to the wooden sign propped against the tree trunk, to the faces of her husband and daughter, all transformed by loss yet somehow more fully themselves. "He knows," she said simply, hope held securely in her hands, the promise kept, the circle unbroken, the tea party that would never truly end as long as its story continued to be shared. In the parking lot, as they loaded the last boxes into their car, Emma noticed Thomas and his mother walking toward their vehicle. The boy's steps were slow, fatigue evident in his small frame, but his giraffe held pride of place in his arms. "Mom?" Thomas called back over his shoulder. "Can we come again next year? Spots really wants to." His mother's eyes met Emma's across the distance, that universal gaze of parents who understand both the weight of uncertainty and the necessity of hope. "We'll be here," Emma called back, certainty filling her voice. "The tea party will be waiting for you." As they drove home in the gathering twilight, Emma held Hope on her lap, the small brown bear with the red-stitched heart that contained 4 simple words she no longer needed to read to remember. "I'm still with you." The grief remained, of course. It always would. But alongside it now flowed purpose and connection and even moments of unexpected joy, a legacy far greater than Lucas could have imagined when he first sketched a tea party invitation in wobbly crayon letters. His last wish had become their ongoing promise, not just to remember him, but to create space where others could find what they needed most. Community in suffering, celebration in the midst of uncertainty, and always, without exception, hope, bundled in the soft comfort of a simple stuffed bear. He knew, Emma whispered as their house came into view, lights glowing welcome through the windows. Somehow, he always knew.